And now we shift to Europe. Over the last few days in London, there have been conflicting protests, thousands in support of the Palestinians and also hundreds in support of Israelis. And now we're joined by our contributor, Jonathan Sacerdoti, for Insight. Hi, thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, Natalie.
Good evening. What is your insight on the situation there? What do you make of it?
Well, after we saw several protests over the last few days, both in the United Kingdom and beyond in Europe, against the Israeli actions going on at the moment in Gaza, today was somewhat different. There were thousands of people gathered outside the Israeli embassy in Kensington in London, all waving Israeli flags showing their support for Israel's right to defend itself. With an overall much more peaceful mood to the crowd there. There was no violence. There was no blockage of the road. The police had cordoned it off so that the crowds could stretch along the pavement, and that they did for quite some way up and down the road just near the embassy building itself. Those people came from all parts of society, many of them Jewish, from the Jewish community here, showing their solidarity with Israel's right to defend itself against the rockets and the terror tunnels. But some came from other parts of the community as well. The British society was represented in many different ways, with Christians and Muslims there as well. A few speeches, but mostly people singing Israeli songs to show their solidarity and to show their strength and solidarity with the troops who are now fighting to defend Israel.
I see. And in terms of the pro-Palestinian protest, was that tone similar to some of the images that we've seen in France?
The pro-Palestinian protests are altogether somewhat different from what we saw today in Kensington from the pro-Israel side. They tend to be much more violent, and within their ranks you can often hear quite loudly Nazi or anti-Semitic chants, and you can hear people with chants and banners proclaiming from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Of course, a chant famously denying the right of Israel to exist at all between the River Jordan and the Mediterranean. So there's some level of extremism going on that is bubbling to the surface when events like this take place in Israel, making many Jews in the country very afraid about rising anti-Semitism in general, and how it gets ignored because it often is allowed to appear among these anti-Zionist or anti-Israel groups who are then able to turn violent in some instances.
Have you noticed any kind of escalation in movement, more protests in general over the last few days?
Well, it's always the case that when these sorts of operations go on in Israel, when we look at Cast Lead and Pillar of Defense, we can see that this does tend to whip up a large crowd of anti-Israel protest here. Those people are drawn from all parts of a certain part of society, so you'll get them from the far left quite often. You get a lot of Muslim groups that join in, some far left charities, and even the extremist Jewish niche cult of the Neturei Karta, who will join in and often get a lot of attention because of their Orthodox Jewish dress, but their strongly anti-Zionist message and their background of going to Holocaust.
Well, thank you very much for your insight. That's all the time we have for now. The IDF announced that